heroes in our home are writers and authors, and I feel like we learn so much through stories and books.
Wow.
And I think you said it so beautifully. I think it was on in one of your interviews, maybe it was with Seth Meyers or something, what you were talking about windows and mirrors and
Mm-hmm.
how important that is. And I feel like with us in our home, that's so important to be able to learn so much about people and cultures and food and life. And
Wow.
like, I mean, you're
It's so true. No, I feel like it's my go-to. And, um, just how even the windows, like I feel like when I was younger, I thought about the windows, for other people, right? Like, and the mirrors for myself, me looking for books where I was represented. And I feel like I've learned so much through the windows of the books that about myself and about the world and about cultures that I would never have known anything about. I mean, when I was writing Another Brooklyn, and when I was talking about the different rituals people have for death and dying, and how narrow our own mourning experience is here in the US, and how little time we're given for that mourning experience, right? Whereas other cultures, they know how to do this. They know how to, stay connected to the ancestors, that how to respect the dead and respect that loss. And I was like, wow, I never thought about it, right? I just thought that this is how it is, and this is what you do, and you grieve for a certain while, and you get over it because people stop having
right.
patience for it, right? So it's interesting. It's been a journey. Reading has been such a journey for me.
That is so cool. This leads into my first question for you, which
Mhm.
most people would really feel a sense of accomplishment from just one book. So, I mean, let alone dozens. And I just want to know, how do you do it? And what's the typical day look
Oh my
for
goodness.
you?
It's so interesting. I mean, I'm so honored to be here. I love your book club. I love the work you're doing. I love, the fact that you're such a reader. It's all exciting for me. So I'm so glad to be talking to you, Jen. And, I've wanted to be a writer since I was 7 years old. And I didn't have a path, right? I didn't know any writers. It wasn't like now where you could actually have a conversation with a writer. There weren't websites, there was nothing. I just had sometimes the hardcover, but most often paperback books that maybe there was a little author bio, but I had no sense of the process, but I knew I loved telling stories. And so once I started publishing, I didn't see myself as writing one kind of book, right? I didn't see myself as writing just novels. I knew I wanted to write poetry. I knew I wanted to write fiction. I didn't even know that a category of young people's literature really existed. I knew those books were out there because I saw the Newbery stickers and stuff. But I knew when I knew that existed, I knew I wanted to write that. I just loved it. And basically, it's hard to turn my brain off, right? So there's always some idea up in there, and it's not. So I'm usually writing a young adult book, maybe a picture book, an adult book. Maybe I'm working on a newspaper article, and when I get bored with one, I go to the other, and when I get bored with that, I go to the next, and 32 books later, this is where I am. But it's changed too with motherhood, right? I remember, I don't know how it was for you, but I remember when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was trying to write really fast because I knew when she got here, I wouldn't have time to write. And then she was 2 weeks late. And so that gave me an extra 2 weeks to finish behind you, I think. And then there was that period where they don't move so much, so you can write. Right? You can just put them to your boob and keep on working.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they roll over. But she started walking at 9 months, and I remember my partner was doing her medical residency, and here I am, at home, mothering and trying to still do my work. and I'm like, wait, no, you're supposed to walk at like 14. I was supposed to have another couple of months of like being able to so, and then it was kind of, but it really shifted. So I realized that I had to kind of I had to build boundaries around my writing. I remember a writer talking about the closed door, right? Like her mother said, when that door is closed, mommy is working.
Yeah.
And as a mom, that's so hard to do, right? You hear your kids knocking. So it's definitely been a journey to figuring out how to continue to do
I
it.
can only imagine. So Red at the Bone first, it was honestly probably one of my favorite books I've ever read in my life. And it's
Thank
just
you.
so beautiful, the way that you're able to talk about so many different topics and subjects. And the one big one is obviously family, and how family sticks together and circling and moving together apart, but always coming back together. In a way, it almost reminds me of a Murmuration in the way that it twists and turns. And it seems to be that family is a common theme in your writing. Can you share a little bit about what inspired you to write this novel?
I really wanted to talk about motherhood, and the complexity of it, and what does it mean to choose motherhood at 15, 16, when when we as adults looking at Iris, we know she's going to change your mind. She's 15, right? And we think of all the many times we've changed our minds since we were 15, 16. And so I really wanted to examine that, because I always think of the teen pregnancy as the tragedy novel, right? And what if it wasn't that? What if it wasn't tragic? I also really wanted to look at the Tulsa Race Massacre, because I didn't find out about it until I was in my 20s. And it was such an important part of what happened to Black wealth. And so, especially over the last 4 years, hearing people blame underserved people for their circumstances, especially underserved people of color, and not look at the history of this country post-Reconstruction and lynching and Jim Crow and all of these ways, and Rosewood and Tulsa and every place where Black wealth was destroyed in some way. And I really wanted to talk about the people who came after that and what their struggles were, and who they were, to bring that moment into present day. And so those were two of the themes. And then, of course, once I had that idea of thinking about what it means to be a teenage mom, what does it mean to be a teenage dad? And so then the character of Aubrey, who's one of my favorite characters in the book, came about. And thinking about him, I thought about, again, there's the stereotype of the Black father who leaves, right? And what if that is not, what if we tell that story, and we tell the truth about it? We tell the story of the Black fathers who stay, the many, many, many Black fathers who stay, and what they look like, and what their stories are. So it was such an interesting process in Red at the Bone, because it's not a linear narrative, because of the overlap and the way it goes back and forth. And it starts in the middle of the book. It starts in the middle of the story, right? But that afternoon, there was an orchestra playing, is the first line. And it's showing you as the reader, you're not coming in at the beginning. You're coming in the middle of a narrative. And in that middle of the narrative that starts way back Tulsa and before to this point, and that continues with Melody going off, it's talking about that long line of history, present, and future. So it was really fun to just kind of investigate all those different places and to go back and research the Tulsa Race Massacre, and also to really think about family. At that time, when I was writing it, my daughter was, I think, 15, 16. And but having written so much for young people, especially young adults, as a writer, Madeline L'Engle said, when you write remembering the child you were, because the essence of childhood doesn't change. And I think about that when I write. I go back to being 10, I go back to being 15, I go back to being 8, and really try to mine those memories. So when I was writing Melody, it was easy for me to access my teenage self, and Iris as a teenager, but it was also easy to look at my daughter and say, yeah, that's teenagerhood too, right? It looks like that, and it looks like this. So
I was just wondering, how do you avoid those stereotypes? And was that a conscious decision or conscious choice?
Yeah, it is a very conscious decision. And, I think of stereotypes like cliches. And I think a careful writer is really trying to not put cliches in their book. And the same, it's easy to do a stereotype, right? It's easy to have some idea of what the world thinks all people are, what this country thinks all people are in a narrative, and then just, oh, it's like, oh, the audience will get that because they know this thing. And I found as a writer that the more specific you are, the more universal the writing is. And so to be deeply specific allows for the avoidance of stereotypes, and also being very conscious of stereotypes, right? I know there's a stereotype of the Black teenage pregnant girl, and I know that's a stereotype. That's not the truth. And not to say that there aren't Black girls who get pregnant as teenagers. There are also white girls who get pregnant as teenagers, and Latinx girls. So to really think about it and think about going back to that idea of mirrors and windows, I remember this when I wrote a book called I Hadn't Meant to Tell You This. And actually, no, even a better example is Each Kindness, which is a picture book. And when I wrote Each Kindness, which is the story of two girls, and one is a poor girl coming into a new school, and the other kids kind of dislike her. And when I was writing that character of Maya, who's the poor girl, I said to myself, what happens when the kid who is like Maya comes to this book? Is she going to see herself as a victim? And then I didn't want to do that. So I was very intentional about, at one point in the book, Maya's asking all the kids to play jacks with her, play a game with her, and the kids don't. And she comes back into the classroom and she's like, I bet you can't guess who the new Jacks champion of the world is. And that was a very intentional moment for me to show the reader, she's not stopping. She's not getting beaten down and going to sit in the corner and not play a game. And she's going to, do her thing and come back and say, you know what, I got this. Yeah. And so that reader can see that. And so I am conscious of the messages I'm putting on the page in the character, inside those characters. But I think if we deny that the stereotypes exist, or if we are not conscious of the way we use them ourselves, they're going to end up in our books. I think the main thing is my books are character driven, right? So the character is even big, it comes to me before plot. Like I always say, you put two people in the room, you have everything. You have conflict the minute they start talking, you have dialogue, you have the setting of the room, and eventually as their conflict grows, the plot comes. And so I tend to start with the characters and see where they take me. Everything I write, I read out loud because it has to sound a certain way as well as look a certain way on the page. And that really helps me get deeper into their character. I also, ask lots of questions about what the character wants and how they're going to get it. I mean, it's interesting because I just finished the screenplay for Red at the Bone, and shifting from, writing the novel to writing the screenplay, there's still all those questions that you have to ask, but you're asking them in this 3-act structure, and things have to happen differently. But in both cases, you really have to have a deep sense of who your characters are. And so for Iris, I was constantly asking, what does she want? And it made sense that it changed because she grew up, right? She wasn't stagnant in this way. Whereas Aubrey was a kid. He's like, here's stability. I've moved all my life, and here's stability, here's love, here's something solid, this child, here's, this good home. I'm good. I've gotten what I wanted.
Almost too, when there's a trauma in someone's life and they're sort of stuck in that trauma, there's almost a sense of that with him too, where he is good, and he's not wanting to necessarily evolve as Iris is. He's good with his love, his stability, and stuck there too. How do you feel about her now? How do you feel that she's doing? And if you could follow up with her future.
Oh, I think like Aubrey, she definitely has trauma, right? She has the trauma of her mom leaving and the trauma of her father's demise. And she also has the foundational structure of those grandparents of Sadie and Po Boy, and her good friends. And so I like to think that she's absolutely fine and fire. I mean, I think the character was fire on the page when I was writing her, and I think she's grown into that fire even more so. So one thing, you'll see in Harbor Me, it's like that the importance of chosen family as well as the biological family around you. And I feel like Melanie and her young people have grown up into, good, less young people because they're not old yet. But yeah. And I feel like even me writing that scene, I always think of my work as not necessarily physically autobiographical, but I always talk about how it's emotionally autobiographical, right? You really have to go to those places and feel those feelings in order to get them on the page. And writing the Aubrey scene, I kept rewriting it. I'm like, no, it's not ending like this. I'm like that's not what happens. And the rewrites sounded stilted. They sounded dishonest. And finally coming back and reading that out loud, and I was boo-hooing as I, read what I had just written, just because I mean, I lived through 9/11. I was pregnant during 9/11. It was traumatic AF, but I also, because I was pregnant, and then because I was a new mom, there was this way that you put this shield up. It's like, no, I can't deal with this right now. I'm going to compartmentalize until I can. And I do feel like in that moment with Aubrey, because we lost people, it was like, I'm dealing with this now. Like this, all these feelings that I've been holding back are right here, right now. And this is what it looks like. So, and then thinking about all the young people, because that's what happened. I mean, people ran out of their school and it was like, my dad is in that building. My mom is in that building. My sister works there, and just having to go back there. And I think that's the reason that people don't finish books, right? That people aspire to write and then don't finish writing, because you really have to go to those hard places to get at the truth, to get at that honesty in the narrative.
I love that you write for adolescents as well. I think it's just like you're so well-rounded, and the young children. We have books upstairs that I'm reading to my 3-year-old, and I'm having fun with. So I just love that you're able to do that. I want to know what your secret is to writing about serious issues for adolescents. I mean, it's challenging, I'm sure, for adults. I can't imagine what it's like having to weave that into adult or young children books or children.
Yeah, it's I think the main thing is to keep the hope in the book, right? You have to bring hope. So if you're writing about something that feels challenging, it just can't be devastating, because you didn't want to feel, I mean, we don't want to feel devastated now, let alone when we were young people. And our young people don't want to, but they also don't want to be lied to.
Right.
Right. So, because they see right through us, they're so much smarter than we are.
I know. That.
It's bananas. And so for me, it's that balance. It's like, how do I talk to them and let them know that I see them as human. I see them as brilliant. I see them as kind, and show them that, yeah, these things happen, and here's the hope, and this is why we get up every morning, and this is why we're still here, and this is why we survive, and we'll keep surviving. I just finished this picture book called The Year We Learned to Fly. And it's basically about these two kids. It's the same illustrator who did The Day You Begin, because I love him. And about the two kids who basically are cooped up in their house, right, for different reasons. And they're told the story of the people being able to fly. There's the story about the Africans being able to fly back across the water when they were enslaved, and that's where their spirits went to. And so their grandmother teaches them to close their eyes and basically leave their bodies, and then they begin to teach other kids how to do it. But it is this moment of like, yeah, we are in this pandemic and we are in our houses, and how do we survive this? How do we stay sane? How do we grow up whole and filled with empathy and love, given that we're at this kind of point right now? But I really do think that there's nothing we can't talk about with young people, as long as we do it at their level, and at their intellectual level, at their emotional level. Even with Harbor Me, I mean, the book you and your son are reading now, there's a lot going on in that book, and it's told from the point of view of 10 and 11-year-olds, and this is how they talk, and this is what they know. And they're, you know, they're just so clear-eyed young people. And so when you bring that to them, they believe you, and they're there with you because they do know you see them. And with the very young kids, when I'm writing picture books, I think of it like poetry, you know. So or like what, I don't know if you've read The Other Side, but The Other Side begins, that summer the fence that stretched through our town seemed bigger. We lived in a yellow house on one side of it, white people lived on the other, and mama said, don't climb over that fence when you play. She said it wasn't safe. And so that's the first page, and it's beautiful watercolors, but line by line the kid is asking, when you say that summer the fence that stretched through our house seemed bigger, they're like, what house, what summer, what fence? We lived in a yellow house on one side of it. Who's this we? And white people lived on the other. So now you know the people are not white. And mama said, don't climb over the fence when you play. So now they know it's a child like them. She said it wasn't safe. And then what wasn't safe about it? So they turned the page, right? And so for me, each line break, the way the words are on the page really matter, because I'm thinking of it very visually and what's going, because you're working, as you know, with a very short attention span. And if you lose them, they're gone. Like, I'm out. Like, so it is about, and I'm a minimalist in my adult writing, and it's, I just bring that to my writing for children, or I brought that to my adult writing because I was writing young people's literature a lot more before I started writing more adult books.
There's so much optimism, and which is one of the things that I love also in your books, is that you just have so much optimism, and you've said that you dislike books that don't offer hope. So how do you keep that optimistic, and especially during a pandemic and everything that's been going on politically with the election and Black Lives Matter? How do you make sure to keep things optimistic for your reader?
We're still here. I mean, that for me, that every day is, I'm like, especially, as people of color, Black people, we came here to be enslaved, to work until we died, to create more enslaved people who worked until they died, to make this country rich for people who didn't look like us. And we didn't die. So that's that, we went on to become writers and presidents and lawyers and teachers and librarians. And to me, that is amazing. So I think that's what I carry with me every day. And my daughter's always like, you're so conceited, mommy. I'm like, no, we're amazing. Like, this is amazing. Yeah. So I think that and I definitely have a deep belief in the human spirit and humans in general. Like, I think at the heart of it, even my partner's always making fun of me because when someone's behaving badly, I'm like, they might have a brain injury or something. Yeah. Like, she's like, you think everyone has some kind? I'm like, they might have some deep damage in their lives. Like, I don't think anyone is born bad, right? So I think that helps, like, understanding, not just seeing people as a problem or seeing a person as a problem, but just having this hope that we've survived. We have lots of challenges. Some of us don't come through those challenges in the best light, but a lot of us end up trying to be okay in the world. And I think that keeps me so optimistic. I do think that people are inherently good. So even when we're talking about stuff like racism, I think it's fear. Like, I think that fear is heartbreaking to me. It's like, why are we in a country that's raising this kind of fear, and how do we fight against it? But not to say, oh, that person's racist, they're bad. Like, it's so much more complicated than that to me. So that kind of, the work keeps me optimistic. And the work that has been done keeps me optimistic.
I got tattoos when I was 22. I was in New York. I was drunk with one of my best friend's sisters, got tattoos on my wrists, and I got them removed after I had my baby, my first baby, because I'm my baby. And I'm like, no self-respecting mother would ever have tattoos.
Wow.
And so 2 weeks ago, I don't know maybe it's part of your book, maybe it's where I'm at in my life, but I kind of went, F you world. I am Jen no matter what, and that was part of who I am. So I actually just put them back on. Funny enough.
Oh, thank you.
This is what a mom looks like.
What are your tattoos? I know I have so many tattoos. They're all covered up in turtlenecks.
I love it. I can't wait to get more. They're just stars. It's nothing like.
Oh, wow. Oh, those are beautiful, though.
Oh, thank you.
That's fabulous.
But it's motherhood's one of those weird things. Like, let me see.
It's so true. I don't know if you can see it. So this is an olive tree because we go to the south of France all the time, and my partner and I both got it, and we got different roots because my roots are different than her roots, so hers are a little craggly, you know, from her childhood, and mine are, you know, huge family coming from lots of different places. But I just love it. Every time I look at it, I am so happy.
I would be too. We just planted olive trees actually in our front yard. They're my favorite. Olives and oaks. They're so I don't know, something about the leaves and the roots and the beautiful. Well, speaking of being a badass, you recently received the MacArthur Grant, which is so amazing and so cool. What was it like to receive that phone call?
The MacArthur calls, and this is the call. You know, I've known people who've gotten the MacArthur. I have not dreamed of getting the MacArthur. I thought, you know, but I'd be MacArthur adjacent my life. And knowing MacArthur, a couple of MacArthur people is really nice, right? You know, these geniuses. Yeah. It's August and the phone rings, and it's a Chicago number. And I'm like, I don't know anyone in Chicago. It's probably spam. I'm not going to answer it. Didn't answer it. Finally, I was coming back from the grocery store, and I just haphazardly picked it up, and the woman says, you know, hi, this is Cecile. Yeah, I'm calling from the MacArthur Committee. And I literally sat down. Like like my legs went out from under me, like completely out from under me. And I was just like, oh, shoot. Like, is this that call? And I knew it was, right? They wouldn't call to ask me about something else. And so I was just like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. I was speechless. And you know, I've gotten some awards in my life, and I have never been speechless. I have never been speechless. And so I remember even with when Brown Girl Dreaming got the Newbery Honor. So this was my fourth Newbery Honor. And so they call it, it's the Newbery Committee calling. So the fourth one, by the time they said Newbery Honor, I'm like, okay, who got the gold? Like, I was just shady by that point. And then it was like, Frank Kwame Alexander. I'm like, okay, the crossover got the goal. I'm good. And so, but literally I sat down and, you know, we chat, and I cannot believe it also because when another friend had gotten it, they called in July, and they had to keep it secret till September. So by August, I figured MacArthur's chosen those, you know, everyone knows who got it. So I was completely taken off guard. I was over by our main house, and my partner was here seeing patients remotely. And so I ran I put down the phone, I ran the 200 yards over here, and my son's following behind me, and he's like, what? And you can't tell anywhere, you can only tell one person. So I figured the family unit is my one person. And so I run, and I tell and my son's behind me, and I'm like, I got the MacArthur. And he's like, what's that? And I'm like, it's a huge award. He's like, it's not like you haven't gotten huge awards before, Mommy. I'm like, okay, way to either be a hater or like to keep me in my place as your mom.
I got the triple crown right now.
I know.
What can we expect from you next? What are you working on? What are we?
Oh man. So I'm trying to finish an adult nonfiction. I'm trying to finish a middle grade fiction book about a boy named Emmett. And I just finished a screenplay for Red at the Bone. I'm working on the screenplay to Another Brooklyn. I have a mini series coming out based on my book, Behind You. So that is, I'm not sure when we're going into the room for that. And a couple other projects.
So amazing. That's so cool. So this one comes from, I think, someone named Pony, which I like the name. Very cool. You weave words together like pieces of people's souls, going beyond the two-dimensional world of the pages and into a hidden place, resting somewhere inside the hearts of your characters. What inspired you to write with such a poetic tone? And What were some of your writing influences?
Oh, that's a great question, Pony. Um, I love language. I feel, as you know, I was a really slow reader. I still am a really slow reader. And I realized I was reading and continue to read so slowly because I'm not only studying the story, I'm studying how it's on the page, I'm studying how words get put together. And when people are lazy, I get annoyed. I read a lot of poetry. I was really scared of poetry as a young person. I thought it was some hidden code that I was not meant to understand. And the more I studied it, the more I started reading poets like Paul Laurence Dunbar and Georgia. Um, I'm blanking on George's last name, but anyway, Langston Hughes, Gwendolyn Brooks, and even Frost and people, and present day people like Cornelius Eady and Ocean Vuong. Like really looking at people who pay a lot of attention to language helps me understand the importance of paying attention to language. And because I read it out loud, I really can hear how it's sounding on the page. And that's important to me. It's important for me for reading to be a very visceral experience, right? So when you go into that story, you are in that world and you are feeling all the feelings. You are part of the narrative. You're laughing when they laugh, you're crying when they cry, and that's all about the language. So that, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel like, yeah, and that couldn't be more true. And I think that's what makes your book so wonderful and so powerful and, and hard at the same time, because sometimes we do things because we're supposed to. And that was what
Mhm.
was so wonderful, is that seeing Iris develop in the way that she was true, that she was true to herself, and she
Mhm.
was a good mother, or a better mother, because of the fact that she
Mhm.
listened to herself and who she was and find herself. So thank you for
Yes. Thank
that.
you.
And thank you again. I'm so honored. I love your work, and I'm so excited to continue to read your work and read it with my children and my family, and
That's so
have
awesome.
you as a rock
Thank
star
you,
in our
Jen.
home. I'm just so
Yes.
appreciative. Thank you.